Hello, welcome to Humanology on Air, April edition. My name is Josiah.
I'm Jeeves. Hi, everyone.
Today is all about influencer marketing, how to work with influencers and content creators. Very exciting, and we always ask a question. We want to prompt you, we want to get you engaged. And today it is, who's the influencer you're following? Who's on the top of your list? I have been sucked into this generative AI space, and so Andreessen Horowitz, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but A16Z, tons of great content, so I'm all about it.
Where
right
do you
now.
follow this person?
The blog, Instagram, blog,
Okay. Social, yeah.
Social. I read the articles, all those things.
I follow This House 5000. I follow a lot of people, but this person has been making really great, homey, DIY type content, and I follow her. She's great.
Cool.
She's
Yeah.
local too. That's kind of fun. We can move on. So today we have a panel of 4 people, myself included. We have Jen Candlish. She's our director of communications. She has been here for 12 years working with B2B subject matter experts, so she has a really interesting lens on the B2B space. Natalie Gorjup is also here. She is our communications strategist. She does a lot of our social media strategy and our influencer marketing strategies. She is in all the socials. And we have a very special guest. We have Leigh-Ann Allaire. You can find her on Instagram. She is a DIY content creator. You can also find her on Cityline with Tracy.
Wow.
And others. Yeah, she's in a lot of places, and she's really awesome. And anyway, we're really excited to get this going. So shall we?
Let's dig in.
Let's do it. I'm so glad that you guys are here today to talk about influencer marketing, which is contentious. I had no idea. So I should tell you that before we started filming, I was talking about influencer marketing to Jen Candlish over here, and she was like, well, influencer is not necessarily a term that everyone likes to use anymore. And I was like, okay, I had no idea. So clearly this field has evolved past my own knowledge of it. Like, my perception of influencer is like, all right, you pay Kim Kardashian a very big sum of money to say something nice about your jeans, and then she does that, and then we move on, and that's apparently not right. So go for it. Correct me.
All right, here I go. So yes, influencer marketing, undeniable. It has grown immensely over the years, right? And it is no longer the Kim Kardashian-esque. Sure, I'm sure some brands are paying Kim Kardashian to wear their jeans, to wear their lipstick, things like that. But the growth of the industry and the way that influencers and different individuals are engaging with brands and creating partnerships has actually exploded and created many different opportunities that brands can leverage. And so gone are the days of just paying for placement and basically using these people as paid ads. We're really looking more at that engagement, authenticity, that credibility and reputation building that we can get from influencer marketing. So, it used to be about, the spokesperson. So you would have kind of a face for your brand or working with those kind of the highest paid celebrities. That, even a decade ago, transitioned into what we would call the influencers. So, influencers who have built a large following on social, for example, where they have honed a lot of trust, a lot of credibility around a certain topic, and, they create influence and drive influence with that community. And really, engagement is the heart of that, of what they do. Then we saw the rise of the micro-influencer. And so the micro-influencer, especially when we're talking social, is that, 50,000 or less, where they have really focused on a niche community. Maybe it's, more of a really specific topic or subject matter. And they focus a lot, again, on that engagement, on that conversation, and they have a certain purpose as well. What's exciting, and why we've also brought Leigh-Ann here, is that, recently, especially with the pandemic and different platforms and the growth of e-commerce, all of that, we've seen more of a focus on content creators. And so these collaborators, these creatives who really put a higher focus on high value quality content. And so, lines are blurred. Content creators can be influencers, influencers can be content creators. It's all kind of, how you see it relates back to brand goals. But ultimately, what I find very interesting is that we're placing a greater value on what we're creating, not who's creating it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you may have a perspective on that.
I feel like I do want to hear your perspective, because I feel like what the message I received was like, we don't say, not like influencer is a bad word or something, but it was like, well, not everyone uses it. And some people are a little bit like about it. And so I'm so curious about.
My feelings about the term influencer are mixed. I think that there is a lot of credibility around the term in the sense of the ability, obviously a brand is wanting help to influence a purchase. And I think keeping that in mind, that there's the advertorial element that will always exist. The reason I have a problem with it is twofold. The industry has kind of been flooded. And I'm at a point with my social feeds that everything just feels like a commercial break. I'm scrolling like, when do I get to the show? Like, give me the real meat and potatoes. Everything feels like I'm being sold. And within that, though, I see opportunity. I think, and I'm sure our conversation will lead there, I think the more that brands can release a little bit of control 100%. And let the content creator run with the messaging, then it starts to feel more authentic. Again, an overused term that I don't particularly love, but holds a lot of credibility. I think that's where the enjoyment factor starts to come back, and that's where we get to the 30-minute sitcom feel of like, you hit it again with that primetime show versus the commercial break. The other thing that drives me kind of nuts about influencer is I hear the younger generation, I've got 2 teenage boys, and a lot of their friends want to be influencers when they grow up. And when I ask them, what is that? They're like 5 million followers. And I then say to them, if you have 1 follower, you're an influencer now. And so I think that there's this expectation that it needs to be so robust, like the Kim Kardashians of the world. And we all have influence, social influence. It's just how you choose to use that influence and how you use that to support your own brand. And then maybe you have the ability to support other brands as well.
I think, too, we've seen with the micro influencers or the micro creators, their audiences are a lot more devoted than some of those big followings, too. We see they're a lot more engaged, they're engaging with the content, and they have a lot of purchase power as well.
They're still accessible.
They're accessible.
They're not the next level, which have potentially agents and all of, like, as I always say, the layers to the onion that you need to peel back, that a brand needs to navigate through to get to that content creator and then develop the messaging and the relationship. At the end of the day, that's the most important key point.
Yeah. This also gets to the value of influencer, right? Like, that's why we engage in influencer marketing and why we have conversations like this, is because these channels add more credibility, trust. Like, inherently, this is what helps brands and why brands are craving and asking for this type of work, because it helps to open them up in meaningful ways that they're not able to from a brand perspective.
So brands, like, if it's a smaller audience, so the reach is smaller, but the value, you are saying,
the engagement could
bigger.
Be exponentially higher.
Right.
So it depends on the brand's goals, I think, ultimately.
Absolutely.
So when should brands be looking to use influencers? Is it like a launch type? Is it like a moment in time? Is it a all the time? Like what?
Select D, all of the above.
Right.
I know. Leigh-Ann's like, always. I would definitely say it depends on the brand, which Jeeves told me not to say over and over again, but it really does depend on the brand. But it can be many things, and there can be many different types of partnerships. We can have one-off partnerships for, let's say, a campaign to align with paid media, a product launch, something that's very time-boxed. We can also have a partnership that's long-term. So you could have someone that you really want to be an ambassador of your brand for the full year, and a longer-term partnership. I would say you should reach out for a shorter term partnership. It can be a little smaller of a window. So I know creators have a lot of content they're working on, and you have a lot of things in the queue, so you can't just pump out content super fast always. We were chatting about this earlier. So I'd say definitely leave a larger window for longer term partnerships, and you can reach out a little closer to when it's short term.
The other thing that's, the beauty of having long-term partnerships, of having kind of that more collaborative relationship, is that, there's also a lot of insights to be gained from having that, right? We're talking about influencers and creators who have, possibly created this unique audience that they're able to gain so many insights from, valuable insights that brands can tap into about, what does their audience engage with? What are the perceptions around a certain topic? What is the awareness around a certain topic? There's so much that they can bring and that they can help support other work that's being done by the brand as well.
And I find on the influencer side, I have the unique ability to bring the fresh set of eyes. So many brands are so in it. Like they can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of blind spots that sometimes exist, and it allows when I'm engaged in conversation with brands, I can ask a lot of questions, and more times than not, there's like some eyebrow raises of, oh, we never thought that maybe that could be our target audience. Like they become so hyper focused.
Yeah.
So it's the ability to kind of widen the perspective a little bit, and then create new storylines and help them reimagine their brand in different ways that they maybe couldn't, that doesn't fit their marketing plan.
Right.
Which again is part of the release of control.
Yeah, or the script, I'm imagining.
Absolutely.
Like you might describe the brand, the product, whatever it is, in a way that like that brand wouldn't describe themselves,
That's
but
it,
that
for
actually
sure.
might feel more real to the consumer or your audience, or
And creator content is not the same as a digital ad. We're not building an ad here. We're building content that people want to consume. And I think a lot of the times that gets lost with the brand as well. They want an ad exactly how they would craft it, but that's not it.
Oh, the number of times I'm sent the press release after we've engaged in the relationship, and here's the press release that you can read. Like just sit on camera.
And you're like, no one wants to watch this.
No, I already fell asleep reading it. Like, I absolutely don't think anyone else would want to see it. No.
It's weird to me, sorry, Jen. It's weird to me that like people find you and they love your stuff and they reach out to you and then they're like, but do it our way. And you're like, but you like me for me. Like you like how I do this.
Right.
Why are you asking? That's really interesting. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. And that's the authenticity that we talk about, right? That kind of buzzword. But that's why a brand chooses to work with a content creator, an influencer, because of what they've already created. They have put a lot of work into what they've created. They know their audience. They bring that authentic feel, whatever their kind of approach is to content development. We need to trust that, and we need to give them the freedom to do so.
On that note, like how much control should brands expect to have? Like on one hand, I imagine it's like, well, they're paying for something. On the other hand, they're paying for you to do you in a lot of ways. So what's like the balance?
I always ask brands to give me their 3 buzzwords that they would like peppered in, and that usually dictates the tone and the vibe of what they want to create, and then they kind of have to release control after that. So what are the 3 main talking points that you really want conveyed? And it also depends on the platform. Like, are we talking a 20-second sizzle for TikTok or Instagram? Because that's going to be really limiting. And sometimes saying anything actually will hinder the product. Like maybe the product speaks for itself, and just let me capture that in a way that best represents me and supports the brand. I always say to a brand, I appreciate you, I appreciate your product, but you will never be the star of this movie, and nor will I, quite frankly. The project is the lead actor, and the product is the supporting actor in this movie, whatever that movie piece of content may be. But as long as they understand that, then that's what helps to kind of carve away at the advertorial side of things, and the lead actor, which is the product, creates the storyline and then creates credibility to why the product is there. Like instead of just going, this is a paid advertisement today for
We are sponsored by Perry.
Right? Versus like, man, I'm really parched. I could use a drink.
Please
you
send us
ever-
money.
That is
Please
a perfect
send us money.
demonstration.
Do you ever feel like brands give you too much freedom that you're like, you didn't do your work to set up this campaign, or?
Yes, without the dialogue, you're setting yourself up for failure. I love when the conversation is, you just do you, like you're so good at what you do, and then you deliver the content. They're like, but not that.
Yeah.
That's not what we had in mind. Well, you had nothing in mind. So my process, and it's not everybody's process, but there's a lot of storyboarding, conversation, making sure that they know exactly what they're getting, and if they don't highlight any issues going into the actual production of it, too bad, so sad. Like it kind of, I hate to say it is what it is,
Right.
but if it's something that I'm really proud of, which I will never produce anything that I'm not proud of, then it's one of those, like, let's see how she goes and let me prove you wrong.
Yeah,
Like, let's see how it
exactly.
performs.
Oh, I love that. And even from a brand perspective, you know, because we play, and like a little bit of my stomach is like, oh, we have to give limitations and we have to tell you what not to
Right.
say, because we play the brand side, right? We have certain brand guidelines or certain areas that we can't play in, right? So I think it's also on us as part of a partnership to bring that to you ahead of time, so that, you know, content creators aren't creating something that can't be used, that all of a sudden we're going back to you and asking for redos and things like that. So as brands, we have to be very clear upfront of what we can't do, or where we can't play, or what our product can't do and can't
Exactly.
promise, so that we're not redoing millions of pieces of content
Right.
with you.
I also think this is the beauty and the power of a longer term relationship, because you can really build that trust over time, and then you really become an advocate for the brand more authentically, right? Like, you know the brand almost better than the brand knows the brand.
You know what? I won't disagree with that, and I'm glad that you say that, because I have a couple of ways that I like to approach relationships, and the first at the top of the list is long-term relationship. And it's not because, oh, I want to be on the payroll for years to come. It actually has nothing about that. It's that if it's a brand I choose to work with, it means that it's a fit within my life and it works for me. And it's not going to be a square peg, round hole situation where I'm constantly thinking, how the heck do I make this work? It just comes natural. So why wouldn't I want to integrate that into my life and share that more with my audience? And for me, I think this is coming back to the beginning of this. The term influencer gives me a shiver down my back, because I really see myself as more of a steward for brands. I'm like the carrier and the caregiver of their product. I care deeply about the success. It's hard to qualify what that actually means in influencer marketing. But for me, my goal is, I hope people love the product as much as I do. And in that thought process, it means they're buying the product. Like, if I really love something, I want people to have that experience with the product too, and have the same great results that I'm having. So inevitably, my goal is to help you sell. That's the goal. So the long-term relationship and the steward part of the relationship, for me, allows me in most cases to have a seat at the table. So it eliminates a lot of the disconnect. It eliminates those conversations of, you just do you. Well, I can do me best when I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And again, give you a broader perspective, maybe from a creative standpoint, and without thinking about all of the corporate limitations of, oh, we don't have money for that, we don't have headcount, we don't have assets. Like, let me figure that out and check some boxes for you. And what are your goals, and how can I help support that at the end of the day?
I think also from an audience perspective, an audience on social, when they're seeing this content parceled out over a longer period of time, it's feeling more natural for them, right? It's not like, she talked about this product once, we never saw it again. It's natural.
Flash in the pan,
exactly.
for sure. Which I have a problem with, because, sorry, not to cut you off, but that to me lends to the integrity part of the influencer marketing. When I see people who are at that point of really trying to gain notoriety and build a following, and the goal for that is to monetize their feed, and then you start to see the dilution of, this week I love this shampoo, but next week, you know how I told you last week that was the best? This is actually the best, hashtag sponsored. And you kind of go, well, like, who is this, and what do I believe anymore? Versus, again, the long-term relationships. Listen, I have brands that I've worked with for years, and I'm not contracted with them anymore, and I still talk about the brand, because it's, A, I do love the brand, it fits my lifestyle, and B, how would it serve me to say, you know how I said that was the best? I lied, and I have refused competitive lucrative brand relationship and sponsorships because it's competitive with somebody that I previously worked with, and I really believe that their product's best. So it's, am I hurting myself in the short term? Sure. But it's a long game. And I think not enough people look at social and brands and influencers look at it as a long game. They're looking at it for the flash in the pan situation. Like, we want to go viral. We want to sell a lot of units, or I want to cash a check and I want to have the optics that I'm a big deal working with brands. Erase both of those, all of those, and just play the long game.
Right.
Yeah.
Would it ever make sense for brands to not have their own social presence and literally, or have one but a very, minimalist one, and only work with creators and influencers? Like,
Well,
do those dollars ever make sense? Does that strategy ever make sense? Especially when you consider, like, how many brands do you follow
right.
versus, like, creators? Like, you follow creators probably. Sure, if you, like, love a certain brand, you might have it in your feed. But probably you follow people. And so, I'm just like, maybe this is that weird?
Good question. I do have thoughts on this. Do you want to
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think social media for brands, it's a lot more than just content. Their social media, that is their call center, that's their customer service, right?
That's
so
true.
it has a larger role in the ecosystem. But in terms of content, I think content creators are a great way to make a lot of content that's probably a lot better than your brand could make itself, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
maybe, yes, you're right. There are, like, people being able to, like, reach out and tell you that they're mad at you, I guess, is super valuable.
It's a lot more than that,
And help them.
No, I know. And you need a presence, and I'm not suggesting you ought not to have that. I'm just wondering, like, yes, creators in all likelihood will create better content than a brand could, and or they'll create content that people will engage with more, just by virtue of them following the creator, not the brand. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. My stance is you still need a fulsome social media strategy and presence, but I would love to hear your take.
I agree. And I think it's a layering on. It's
Yes.
like there's so many missed opportunities that, again, it's not just, hey, go produce that video. What else? Like, if you're already doing that video, what other assets could be created? And maybe you don't know, but the influencer sure does. So ask that question when you're in the midst of it. I'm now in this formula or routine where, why wouldn't I just snap some still photography? And do you have a use for still? Do you want product in situ? Like, do you want it in lifestyle? Like, what do you want? What do you need? How can I best support you? If I'm already putting in the effort, why don't we take those few extra steps and check some internal boxes for you so that you don't have to set up a full studio day and outsource or have internal pressure, because everybody's already, like, usually internally so strapped for time. There's never enough headcount for the tasks that need to be done. So how can we package that out? So for me, even when I'm working with brands, it's yes, okay, I'm going to create the social content for you, but what owned pieces would be beneficial for you that I can also help with? So, and I think that that's, again, a huge opportunity, letting the influencers into the fold and absorbing them into the brand. I think the other big missed opportunity that so many brands aren't taking advantage of is UGC, the user-generated content. If a brand spent an hour a day, dedicate one person for 1 hour to just comb through social, looking for keywords, looking at hashtags, you will find a plethora of content, people already using your products that maybe aren't influencers, nano influencers, micro influencers. Highlight them, which leads me to my third point of why so many brands aren't actually utilizing the influencer content themselves.
Right. Do people, so for UGC, I know this is, like, logistical, but whatever. Yeah. Do you think brands are like, oh, we don't know if we're allowed to use?
But that's where that's the
reach out,
conversation point.
Right.
hey,
Like,
we're so
you
glad
just-
that you loved our content. Like, I think that's truly building community.
Right.
When you're
Yeah.
building your online community to build an ambassador program that maybe doesn't have any financial ties to it, but letting people feel like they're part of your community. And then
Yeah.
it makes them want to share more. Wow, they loved
they
my
appreciate
project.
it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Like when because this is something that we coach brands through, or we do ourselves, and we reach out to people, and we love your content, we love your project, are we okay sharing it? People love that. They
They're
want
thrilled.
to
It's
see
like,
their
it's
content.
old school
Yeah.
being featured in a magazine. Who's going to
Exactly.
say, no, I don't want to be on the
Yeah.
glossy pages of your magazine? Of course. And tell me when you're posting it, tag me so I can
Yeah.
tell all my
Yeah.
friends.
That
Hey,
makes a
Mom,
lot
I was
of
in the
sense.
background of the news tonight. Watch at 6 o'clock. Like,
Right.
that's exactly what it is.
It
It's like,
is.
I was featured by this brand. It's exciting for them. It's helpful for us. Like, it's definitely a win-win when you can get that UGC.
I think a lot of companies are afraid of reposting like unfiltered content and rough content.
Right.
But now we see with TikTok, that's what people love. So I think a lot of brands have to get past, oh my gosh, it's not perfect. It's not exactly our branding. You can still play in that zone and repost that stuff, and it can still work like on your social feed.
Absolutely. The number of brands that I find now that are asking for me to produce content that is raw and gritty. And I'm like, and what does that mean
With
for
a
you? Because
crappy
when
font.
I actually show you me with no makeup and my hair in a messy bun, you're going to be like, nah, no, we had in mind. Like, what's your definition of raw and gritty to be
Yeah.
truthful?
It's a new thing. We talk about this all the time. We're like, how do we produce scrappy content? But then when it comes down to it, you're like,
Wait,
how scrappy?
content that goes viral though. You
Yeah.
can't miss that
Yes.
point. It must go viral.
And kind of looks good. Like,
Well, and even when we're talking about creating content, I know that we know how long it takes to create real scrappy content, but even in your perspective, how long does it take to create those small pieces of content for you?
When somebody just says, oh, here's my product, just go do something, the time that it can take to mentally figure out what will, again, best serve my audience while I walk the fine line of being advertorial, and then creating conceptually what that's going to look like that. I'm working on a project now. It's taken me a week to just conceptually come up with the roadmap of what this one project will look like.
Right.
And they'll never know, like the brand will never know it took that much time, but because it'll result in a pretty style board and some little crafty projects. But it's like those projects each highlight a product, and how do I make it work and fit?
Yeah, of course.
I think the agency peeps feel you on this one.
Yes,
I know you guys do.
I can get it.
I know this is your
I
life. You live this.
But
yes.
you know what? I feel like it's a good segue into money. Feel the energy suck out of the room. We're talking about money. Well,
It's
just
my favorite topic. I love talking about money.
There we go.
I do.
yeah. Well, how much should I expect to even bother going into this market with? Like,
Yeah.
if you're someone with like $500, it's probably like, well, get out of here, right? Probably.
Unless you want
No.
one
Yeah.
post, one single post.
So let's talk about the different factors that go into this. We have, for an influencer or a creator, we have audience size. So that's how that's going to affect it. If someone has a nano or a micro following, the amount of money is going to go down. So maybe $500 to a couple thousand could be somewhere we could
for
play
like
in.
one post.
For maybe like a
Probably.
grouping of content.
Okay.
Like an activation, as we would
Yeah.
call it. Yeah.
And then if you're paying for a longer term partnership, you're partnering for you're paying for someone to basically be your ambassador for a long period of time, and that means saying no to other
That's it.
partnerships. So
Right.
you're also paying for that. You're paying for
Exclusivity, use of
exclusivity,
likeness,
exactly.
Right.
like
So is
potential
that
lost
like
other
a,
opportunities.
like that would be like a salary? Like, is that
Exactly.
what you're?
That's how we
should
think
a
of it,
brand
yeah.
think like, okay,
So
if it's a long-term thing, I need to think salary prices.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So also we have tools that help us get an idea of what it would cost. So we have media tools that can kind of give us an estimate of what we're going to be paying an influencer, but you have no idea until you connect with the influencer and hear their rates.
Right.
And they'll send you a media kit, which will basically say, for this amount of content, this is what you're getting.
Okay, so now we just have to talk about how to connect with an influencer, how to find these people. Do I slide into Leigh-Ann's DMs and say,
Any day
and
of
just
the week.
wave money?
No, listen, like a DM works. I had a brand yesterday reach out and say, I sent you an email, but I didn't get anything back. And they sent it in my DMs, to which we then through DMs realized they didn't have the proper email address. So I appreciate those conversations. Yeah, DMs work. Like, honestly, it's like, it becomes like, how else in this day and age?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of a path of least resistance.
Well, I know people like work with agents. So would an agent answer your DMs?
Usually
if you
the
work with
influencer
one?
would likely answer and turf you over to their
Yeah.
agency to
Got
do the
it.
negotiations. I don't have an agent. I've never had an agent because, as I mentioned, I like talking about money. I'm not fearful about it, and it's not because, I was going to say because I don't love money. Who doesn't love money? But I'm not nervous to talk about money. Like, it's part of business. It's the art of the negotiation. And at the end of the day, also not working with an agency, let's be honest, sorry agency, but they're like, if all the money's coming to me, I can be a little more creative with the budget. And it's not like this set guidelines of this is the line item price for everything. I can have those creative conversations about what can we make work that's not one size fits all necessarily.
And when she says agencies, she means talent management
Yes,
agencies.
talent agents.
Not us.
No, exactly. I love working with PR because honestly, like there is PR and creative agencies because there's a level of creative buffer that can happen there, and often like you get it on both sides. Like you very much have to sit on the fence. And sometimes those conversations are much easier had through the messenger. Sorry, guys, but you end up sometimes being the messenger. But it's a little more palatable, I think, to the brand, opposed to working with that diva who just wants to do all of whatever she wants to do on social media. Like you guys are able to buffer that a little bit, which
we'll
is
fight
really
for the good
beneficial.
creative.
For sure.
Well,
So-
and when it comes to creative too, I think that's also something that a lot of people miss is that, sometimes they go right to, okay, we're going to start working with an influencer or content creator and completely miss the rest of it. Whereas what we find as well is when you're able to, maybe it's a campaign and you're able to root it in a great creative idea or, something that will also tie the other elements of what's happening in your marketing ecosphere, then it can get even stronger. Then you're not just a one-off program where someone's over here talking about your brand and creating content. It's really tied in with a stronger, creative story.
I always have much more confidence working on sponsored content when there is an agency involved. Because that tells me that the brand sees the value overall, that they're working with an agency that can bring that big picture to the table. Again, because it's so easy as the brand to get caught in the daily minutia of everyday tasks and not seeing from the 30-foot view. So an agency is invaluable in terms of being the roadmap, really, for all the content pieces along the way.
And probably advocating for your values.
Oh, for
as
sure.
well.
Yeah.
On both sides, yeah.
So how do you find, so I'm a brand that doesn't even know about Leigh-Ann yet. How do I just scroll Instagram? Natalie?
So, like I mentioned, we use a lot of media tools to find influencers. Sometimes it is scrolling on Instagram, but most of the time it's using tools to do a ton of research and basically use our strategic filters we've outlined. So, what are the goals of the brand? Are we working with certain locations? Are we looking for a certain type of person, certain following, like that type of thing? And then it's combing through the most relevant searches to basically find someone that works for what we're doing.
Well, and social media has become so searchable.
Right.
It really is its own search engine now. So just dive in and look for people who, again, are already talking about your product potentially, or fit from a lifestyle perspective, like that you think would be, who would actually use the product, opposed to going, they have 10 million followers, we should just go give them some money.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
that's
that makes
completely the wrong approach.
The other thing to take it in a bit of a different direction too is already being immersed in an industry. Sometimes you see people who are kind of loudspeakers or loud shares. This happens a lot in B2B. So as opposed to B2C, where we might, lean into our tools a lot more and things like that. In B2B, there may be people or experts who are kind of bubbling to the top and maybe, sharing a lot of content or sharing a lot of perspective in an area that we really want to communicate with our audience about. And so with B2B, it becomes often a lot less about reach and the networks that they're creating, but more about like, hey, this person has a really great perspective that aligns with ours in, maybe it's building science, maybe it's coding, things like that. And, we really want to tap into that expertise, that educational
Absolutely.
content versus
Absolutely.
product promotion, et cetera.
Exactly, yeah.
The educational resource part is huge. I find that's the majority of what I'm focused on now. Just the hands-on the product.
Yeah.
And from a consumer's perspective, talking like almost as one of my viewers, right?
Absolutely.
So businesses, and by businesses, I mean like in a B2B context, businesses aren't necessarily using the same tools to scroll through
No.
Instagram. Like, are they, like, because
But
you
maybe
work more with
Instagram's
B2B brands.
Not that like social media, there's a buffet of
Of
social
course.
media
Yeah.
platforms, and maybe not. You don't have to check every single box.
Yeah.
Like I
Exactly, yeah.
find there's some accounts I see, and I'll get like a sponsored post in my feed, and I'm like, I don't want to actually offend any industry, but like one that I would never follow, and I can't imagine anybody would. Like, there's just not enough
Pretty
meat
niche.
on the bones.
Right.
It's so niche, and I appreciate that you're pumping out dollars, and maybe it's just for optics, that they brand recognition, but you're not going to gain a following unless you can come up with some wild and crazy creative idea to really amplify your messaging. It would have to be so outside of the box,
Yeah.
but not just nuts and bolts of whatever that thing is.
Yeah,
And-
not every brand needs to be on every
No,
social media
exactly.
platform. And
No,
we have
pick
that
the right one.
conversation a lot when we do social strategies. If you're not using Twitter, if you're not like giving it love, you don't have to be on it.
Exactly.
Just be on the ones where it makes sense and you're actually creating valuable content, right?
Right.
Less is more in a lot of cases,
Yes.
right? Fewer your audiences. And with that, I'd even challenge it a bit more to say, the content that we get from content creators, from influencers and experts, especially in B2B, it's not necessarily living through social either, right? So we find these experts, we find these partners, we create great pieces of content, and that lives through email, it lives on website, it lives through sales, all these amazing areas where you're partnering with someone who has credibility, who's built that trust, but we're not necessarily leveraging them for their reach and their impressions and all of that. We're leveraging them as, a credible partner that we can show the industry, hey, we're aligned on perspectives. You trust them, trust us and the services we provide here.
Like a speaking opportunity
Exactly.
or a trade
Yes.
show
Yeah.
type.
Yeah, and I think like brands in the B2B space, they might be watching this saying like, "Ugh, we don't need influencers, we don't need creators, but when we were talking about the industry expanding so much, that's what we mean, right? There's people in every niche corner that can be a creator for your brand, even if you're in a B2B space, even if you're in building materials, things like that, right?
So what does success look like for a brand? Obviously there's engagement, but like that is engagement. Like that's one word. Like what does it feel like?
Well, I think on the influencer side of the fence, it's interesting because there's always this expectation of viral, and what even is viral content? So for me, when I'm looking at the back end analytics, that doesn't always tell the full story either. Certainly on the front end, the brands, that what they can see to the naked eye, they'll look at, oh, how many likes did it get? And interestingly enough, or how many comments, interestingly enough, I just had a post, and this is wild, it's never happened to me before. I had more saves than likes on the post,
That's
which means more people saw value in the content to hit save than they did to like it. To me, that's a win. I don't care. You engaged, you found it as a usable resource that you're hoping to come back to one day. That's great. So I think the numbers tell a story, but it comes back to the long-term relationship side of things. I've worked with a few brands that now I've become almost synonymous with them, or I shouldn't even say with the brand, which tells me I'm actually doing something right, because people don't look at me and say, oh, you work for blah, blah, blah. Oh, you are the paint lady. Like people quite literally will slide into my DMs almost daily saying, hey, I have a paint question for you. Can I paint this? And what should I use? And inevitably, because I'm very much aligned with specific brands, and I use the product A because I love it, B because it works, and C because I choose to work with them. So I have, again, experience with the touch and feel of those products that I can give a great recommendation based on my integrity. And I always will say that as well. I will never recommend a paint product or any product, I should say, that I haven't actually physically used. Or I will give the caveat, I've heard about this, never used it, can't stand necessarily like buy what it says it's going to do. Hope you have a great experience with it. But usually I'll say, I've used this, I had great success, or when I used it, here's a couple tips to make your outcome better. All of that to say, it's the slow burn.
Yeah.
It really becomes the slow burn. So that's a relationship that I've crafted over many years. And now optically from my audience, they know me synonymously with the industry because the brand has supported me and supported my passion for their product.
Yeah.
So it really has worked both ways.
From a brand perspective, I would say success depends on what your goals are, but ultimately it's connecting with your target and creating content that is meaningful to them.
Absolutely. And again, I know you don't like that it depends, but it depends. If, are they looking for reach? Maybe they are. Maybe, we love meaningful connection and strong content and content that's going to jump off the page. But some brands ultimately do want that reach. Maybe it's a launch. Maybe they're just gunning for eyeballs. So when we're looking at success, we drive back to those goals and what were they trying to achieve. Ultimately, with influencer relationships, we want that credibility. We want that reputation boost. We want to have those engagements and everything like that. But we do look at the quality, right? And did we tell the story in a meaningful way? That's a huge achievement.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, just to come back to the point of the slow burn, sometimes you can't qualify that until maybe 6 months or a year down the road. Because again, for all of those, the floor that I painted painlessly, I get DMs of people or tagged to posts of people doing that project. It's been over a year. And people are now, they've saved the post, they've come back to it as a resource, and they're now showing that product in their own project. So at the time, the ROI is impossible to gauge, but over time, because I've, again, hopefully built the level of integrity that people trust and saw the process for me, that they have confidence in purchasing themselves.
And that's something you can't quantify.
You can't.
And we talk about that too, right? That balance of, yes, we need to look at the numbers, we need to look at the ROI and quantify that. But to qualify, there's so much more that we can look at. The quality of the content, the quality of the conversations. Are people asking questions? Is there, is
The
there
word of mouth element.
involvement?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really hard to measure. And you kind of have to just trust that you're on the right path in that way.
Nice. I'm going to ask one more question of each of you, and then I think we can wrap. Thank you, first of all. You guys have been so generous with your answers and super, super smart. It's given me a lot to think about. Okay, but let's end with this question. So what do you want our audience to know? What's like the one thing you just need them to, if they didn't listen until now, what do you want them to know? I will start with you, Leigh-Ann.
I would say that influencer marketing and working with content creators should always be viewed as an investment, not a cost. I think it's so easy to put it as a line item and just we'll dump all this money into it, but it's an investment that takes time to craft and curate those relationships over time. And again, you will not see results immediately. So aside from potentially if it's tied directly to a click-through for sales, but I think that's very surface level. Like if that's your only goal to sell units of whatever the product may be, you maybe want that flash in the pan mentality, but if you truly want to build a relationship in a community, it will take time, so you need to invest the time and dollars in the right people and invest in finding those right people. It will take time and effort. You can't just randomly pick some people and throw some money at them and cross your fingers, because if you build it, they might not always come. We've
You
established
can do that, but it might not go great.
Right.
What do you have?
I think creating a collaborative relationship with influencers and creators and giving them a degree of creative freedom and flexibility is going to result in the best content that's going to give you the most value for your brand. They know their audiences better than anyone. They've built those audiences, so relying on them and their expertise, that's really how you're going to get the most worth.
Absolutely. I would say, even going back to the investment point of it, before you even think about engaging with influencers or reaching out to content creators, I would say you really need to put in the time to do your research, understand your audience, understand who you're connecting with. Is it busy moms? Is it, contractors, builders? Who is this unique audience? what are you trying to get across to them, and then you find the right partner, the right creator, and use the right technology to connect with them. Really, you know, the humanology approach of it all, but coming down to that insight before you even make the call or slide into a DM.
And can I also make one tiny point? Try, and this can be difficult, but my final term, to think outside the box, right? That who you think might be, if you have a beauty product, don't just go to beauty influencers. Like, look outside, because they will have a totally different perspective of how they could package somebody else outside of that industry, of how they could package your product, and really add a totally fresh and new perspective and layer to the content.
That's a really good point. Just so you know, since you're curious, my one takeaway is that influencer is a bad word. Now, thank you for joining us for this episode. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Thanks.